They rejected you, and I know it stings. It's human nature to want to close the gap when someone pulls away, to reach, to explain, to fix. But when you're dealing with someone who has an avoidant attachment style, chasing them is the last thing that works. In fact, it's exactly what they hope you won't do. Here's the paradox. The avoidant person rejects connection not because they don't need love, but because they fear what closeness might cost them. Vulnerability to them feels like a trap. So what do? They create distance. They shut down. They pull back. But underneath all of that behavior is a quiet hope. Not that you'll run after them, crying or pleading, but that you'll do something radically different. That you'll walk away with composure, that you'll not need them. Let's pause on that because it's deep. At a subconscious level, the avoidant is testing the waters. They've learned, often early in life, that closeness leads to pain or loss of control. So their emotional instinct is to create space before you get too close. But here's the twist. What they often crave, but don't know how to ask for, is someone who can hold their own without collapsing. Someone who doesn't make their emotional distance a personal wound. So when you walk away instead of chasing, when you say, "I hear your silence and I respect it," you're not just showing emotional maturity. You're communicating that your identity isn't contingent on their availability. And that's powerful, because when you refuse to chase, something incredible happens. You break the cycle. The avoidant expects pursuit. It reinforces their belief that closeness is suffocating. But when you do the opposite, when you calmly let them go, you create the very space where they have to face themselves. And that's where the shift begins. This isn't about playing games. This isn't about pretending you don't care. It's about having the self-awareness and emotional discipline to honor your boundaries without making it about rejection. It's not punishment, it's clarity. Walking away with dignity doesn't mean slamming the door. It means not standing at the door waiting for it to open again. It means you step back, not out of spite, but because you know you deserve mutual energy. You know connection without reciprocity isn't real connection. And you're not in the business of begging for breadcrumbs. That's what the avoidant doesn't expect. They're used to people fighting to stay, sacrificing their self-worth in the name of keeping the peace or salvaging the bond. So when you don't do that, when you hold your ground, when you step away quietly, they have to reconcile with the fact that you respected yourself more than the comfort of staying small. There's something incredibly attractive about that energy, not just romantically, but energetically. It tells the world, I am enough even in your absence, and you know what you are. You don't need someone to validate your worth by choosing you. You prove your worth by choosing yourself in moments when it would be easier not to. Walking away doesn't mean you're giving up. It means you're giving up on giving more than you're receiving. It means you're choosing alignment over attachment. And while that may be difficult, especially if you're deeply emotionally invested, it is also the beginning of liberation. This is what personal power looks like. Calm detachment from chaos and a grounded sense of who you are, even when someone else doesn't see it. The avoidant might not tell you, but this is the moment they notice you differently. Not because you're playing hard to get, but because you're being hard to shake. So the next time someone pulls away, instead of reacting from the wound, respond from the wisdom. Let them go and let yourself rise. They rejected you. Maybe they ghosted. Maybe they pulled away slowly until you were left questioning your worth, your value, your impact. And I know how tempting it is to internalize that, to make it about you, to tell yourself a story that says, if I had been more calm, more patient, more perfect, they would have stayed. But what if I told you that their rejection isn't the end of your story? It's the beginning of your evolution. Because here's what most people miss. When someone rejects you, especially someone with an avoidant attachment style, they're not asking you to prove your worth. They're hoping you don't. They're hoping you don't cling, because deep down they expect that. What they don't expect is for you to transform. And not transform to win them back. That's a trap. That's still centering your growth around their gaze. No, what they don't expect is for you to rise in such a way that they become irrelevant to your forward motion. Let me break this down. Most avoidant people are comfortable with distance because it gives them control. Intimacy is unpredictable. Vulnerability is unfamiliar. And when they back away, they assume you'll either chase or collapse. They do not anticipate you going silent, hitting the gym, enrolling in that class, launching that business, diving into therapy, showing up for yourself so fully that your glow becomes undeniable. They don't expect that, and that's what shifts everything, not just the dynamic with them, but your relationship with yourself. We're taught to equate rejection with inadequacy, but what if rejection isn't about your inadequacy? It's about their incapacity. What if their inability to stay wasn't proof that you're unworthy, but proof that they were never ready for the level of depth you were bringing to the table? This is where the philosophy comes in. Think about it. In ancient Stoicism, the idea was that we can't control what happens to us, but we can control how we respond. Marcus Aurelius said, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." In other words, the thing that hurt you, the rejection, the silence, the emotional shutdown, is not just an obstacle. It's an invitation. It's asking, who will you become in the face of this? Will you spiral or will you sharpen? Healing isn't about waiting around for the avoidant to change their mind. It's about shifting your own. It's about using the space their absence created to fill yourself up, instead of trying to fill the void with their validation. And when you do that, when you start to evolve in their absence, you disrupt the very pattern they're used to. You stop being a character in their emotional drama, and you become the main character in your own. And that's powerful because now you're not just healing to recover, you're healing to reclaim. You're not just moving on. You're leveling up, not in spite of the rejection, but because of it. This is where real confidence comes from, not from being chosen by someone emotionally unavailable, but from choosing yourself so fiercely that anyone who leaves becomes a footnote in your success. Story, let's make this personal. Imagine the version of you 6 months from now who didn't chase, didn't beg, didn't shrink. The version of you who took that pain and poured it into growth, who hit the next level mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually. Now imagine that person running into the avoidant again. The same person who couldn't hold space for your love, who rejected your presence. Imagine the power of standing in front of them, not with bitterness, not with revenge, but with peace. That's the kind of energy that speaks for itself. That's the kind of growth that doesn't ask for closure because it is the closure. And here's the truth. When you rise like that, it's no longer about them. It's not even about proving anything. It's about remembering who you were before you thought you needed their validation to feel whole. So stop focusing on what they're thinking. Stop watching their stories, waiting for a sign, hoping they'll come back around. Shift your energy inward. Rebuild, reinvent, reclaim. Silence is uncomfortable. Let's just be honest about that. When someone pulls away, when communication stops, when a connection goes quiet, our natural instinct is to fill the space. We want to talk. We want to explain. We want to reach across the void and restore the equilibrium. But here's the truth that most people never learn. Sometimes, the most powerful move you can make is to say nothing at all, especially when dealing with someone who has an avoidant attachment style. See, avoidants often create distance not out of malice, but out of habit. Emotional closeness triggers something in them that says, this isn't safe, so they retreat, they shut down. They vanish in that silence, that's their comfort zone. What they expect from you is a reaction, an emotional spike. A flood of messages, an anxious protest, because that confirms what they already believe, that intimacy equals pressure, But when you respond with silence not out of spite, but out of sovereignty, you do something radical. You disrupt their entire framework. Psychologically, this hits different. We're wired for social reciprocity. When someone pulls back, we lean in. When someone goes quiet, we speak up. But when you resist that impulse, when you let the silence hang without trying to fix it, you're no longer participating in their emotional pattern. You're stepping into your own power. Let's talk about the depth of this. In philosophy, especially in Eastern thought, silence isn't emptiness. It's presence, it's awareness. Lao Tzu said, "Silence is a source of great strength." And he was right. Because silence isn't passive, it's active restraint. It's choosing not to spend your energy where it isn't reciprocated. This is where we often get it wrong. We confuse silence with weakness. We think if we don't respond, we're being walked on. But the truth is, it takes far more strength to say nothing than to say the wrong thing in a moment of insecurity. And I want to be clear here. Silence isn't about playing games. It's not manipulation. It's not coldness. It's clarity. It's saying, I don't need to chase you to prove my value. It's saying, I heard your absence, and I accept it as your answer. That kind of self-possession. That's magnetic, that's rare, and that's the energy that starts to shift the dynamic not just with them, but with yourself, because silence isn't just a message to them, it's a message to you. It says, I trust myself enough not to need closure from someone who couldn't give me presence. It says, my peace is more valuable than your confusion. And most importantly, it says, I'm done outsourcing my worth to someone else's emotional availability. That level of emotional discipline creates space. Space for healing, space for clarity, space for the avoidant to actually feel the consequences of their patterns. And maybe they will, maybe they won't, but that's not your concern anymore. The silence you hold becomes your boundary. And boundaries are where self-respect lives. Let's take this deeper. There's a psychological phenomenon called the Zeigarnik effect. It's the mind's tendency to fixate on unfinished business. And that's exactly why silence is so effective. It creates an unresolved loop in the other person's mind. They expected drama. They expected a follow-up, but instead nothing. And in that nothing, they start to wonder. Reflect, replay, because silence, unlike words, can't be argued with. It lingers. Now, that's not why you do it. You don't hold silence to control someone else. You do it because it's your power move, because it keeps you rooted in self-respect rather than reactive emotion. Because you understand that not everything deserves a response, and not everyone has earned the right to your voice. There comes a moment when you realize that protecting your peace is more important than proving your point. When that moment comes, when you choose silence not because you're afraid, but because you're clear, you've already won. You've already outgrown the version of you that needed to be heard by someone who never listened in the first place. So, if they stopped calling, stop calling. If they pulled away, let them go. Don't break your silence to remind them of your worth. Let your absence do that. Let the quiet speak for itself. Let's talk about something that cuts deeper than rejection, deeper than silence, even deeper than abandonment. It's the moment you realize you've been fighting for a connection that was never fighting for you. And here's the truth no one tells you. Walking away is only part of the healing. The real transformation happens when you stop fighting for clarity from them and start creating peace within you. Because here's what most people don't understand. Your obsession with closure, your need for answers, your desperate wish that they'll suddenly show up and explain why they rejected you. That's not about them. That's about your own unresolved wound. The wound that says, I'm not enough unless someone confirms it. But if you keep waiting for someone who avoids their own emotions to suddenly help you process yours, you'll stay stuck in a loop where your worth is always at the mercy of someone else's ability It doesn't work that way. It never has. What you're really craving isn't their validation, it's your own. That inner anchor, that internal voice that says, I know who I am even when you don't choose me, and getting to that place. That's the work, that's the point, not the text message, not the apology, not the closure conversation that never comes. It's the inner realignment. Because if someone has an avoidant attachment style, chances are they didn't leave you with clarity. They left you with questions. But what if those questions weren't meant to be answered by them? What if they were meant to be answered by you? Let's zoom out. Philosophically, this is where self-ownership begins. The existentialists talked about it all the time: Sartre, Kierkegaard, even Viktor Frankl. The idea that meaning isn't something you find, it's something you create, especially after loss, especially after disconnection. You don't wait for someone else to define your story. You write it. You don't wait for a missing piece. You become whole on your own terms. And I get it, this is not easy. When someone withholds love, attention, or even basic respect, your nervous system goes into survival mode. It's not just emotional, it's physiological. You start scanning for signs, overanalyzing their behavior, replaying conversations in your mind. That's your brain trying to make sense of uncertainty. But healing begins the moment you decide to stop looking out there for resolution and start looking in here, in your body, your breath, your present moment. This is where growth gets real. When you stop fantasizing about a future where they finally realize what they lost, and instead start building a present where you realize what you've gained. You've gained truth, you've gained space, you've gained the freedom to grow without walking on eggshells. And if we're being honest, many of us confuse emotional investment with emotional entrapment. We think if I care deeply, I have to stay, but that's not love. That's survival disguised as devotion. True love, the healthy kind, doesn't ask you to abandon yourself just to keep someone else comfortable. So how do you rise from this? You stop looking for external evidence of your worth. You stop measuring your progress by their reactions. You stop trying to win a game they're not even playing consciously. You start showing up for yourself, not out of defiance, but out of reverence. Reverence for your energy, reverence for your future. Reverence for the parts of you that know this situation was not aligned with your highest self. Think about it. Every ounce of energy you spend trying to decode someone else's distance is energy you're not using to build your own wholeness. Every minute spent refreshing your phone, hoping for a message, is a minute lost from stepping into the life that actually wants you in it. So you walk. Not just physically, but energetically. You remove your emotional investment from someone who couldn't reciprocate it, and you reinvest that energy into your evolution. You stop waiting for closure from the person who broke you, and you become the closure that heals you. That's what they never expected. That's what they were never ready for. That you would outgrow their silence, that you would stop chasing, that you would stop hoping they'd wake up and start waking up yourself. So no, you don't need one more conversation. You don't need to explain yourself one more time. You don't need to keep waiting on someone who was never emotionally equipped to meet you where you are. Because the most powerful version of you doesn't chase closure. The most powerful version of you creates it.